Hello, and welcome to Book Circle. I'm Earl Weinberg. This time we will continue our reading of Storm in the Village by Miss Reed. It's spring break, and Miss Reed is entertaining her friend Amy, who brings some startling news. The shock came as we were washing up. Amy wandered to and fro in the kitchen, drying up for me and occasionally returning a piece of china for a second wash. Amy's standards are much higher than mine, and she scrutinized each article with an eagle eye. "I know two adorable sisters," I told her as she flung back a spoon into the washing-up bowl, "who work on the principle that one wets the things and the other wipes, and a very nice cooperative job they make of washing up, with never a harsh word between them." Amy was not impressed. "I don't wonder Mrs. Pringle ticks you off. Look at this smear of mustard. Must be ages old. It's a wonder you don't pop off with typhus." I surveyed the plate, which she held out to me with interest. "That," I said with pardonable smugness, "happens to be gilding." Amy had the grace to laugh and returned it to the dresser. As she lodged it, she said, "And when is Hilary Jackson going away?" "She's gone," I answered, busy scouring the sink. "Well, I saw her last night with that dreadful Franklin fellow. They were just going into the bell." I felt as though I had been hit. Could that foolish young woman really be in the neighborhood? Was she really so infatuated with Franklin that she could deceive Miss Clare and her parents, and also hope to evade the all-seeing eye of Fairacre and its environs? Or could Amy have been mistaken? I clung for one endless second to this forlorn hope, but in my heart I knew immediately that Amy was far too sharp-eyed to be deceived. And I knew, too, with a sudden sickness, that Hilary Jackson was quite silly enough to imperil her good name, the happiness of her friends, and her teaching career at the prompting of this ill-fated infatuation. In a flash, I decided that Amy must not know my doubts. There was still a chance that I might be able to get in touch with the girl and get her to see sense before the tongues started wagging in the neighborhood. "She must have gone off this morning, then," I said, trying to sound casual. Luckily, Tibby created a most welcome diversion by bringing in a squeaking shrew. In the following few frantic minutes, whilst Amy and I tried to rescue it from the outraged cat, Miss Jackson and her affairs were shelved. At 2:00, Amy drove off. I had found the time from her disclosure until her departure agonizingly long, and could only hope that my anxiety was not too apparent. I waved goodbye with relief, and before the car was round the bend of the lane, I had fled up the stairs two at a time to get myself ready for my visit to the cottage in the woods where I hoped to find Miss Jackson. It seemed best to go on my bicycle, for the steep track would tax my ancient car's asthmatic powers and would be more readily noticed. A bicycle leaning against John Franklin's fence could be anybody's, but the car could belong to me alone. The day was close and sticky. Clouds of minute thunderflies wafted about in the warm air, tormenting and tickling sensitive places like one's neck and eyes. I was seriously perturbed as I pushed along about the best way to handle this uncomfortable interview. It might be easier, though perhaps more painful for Hilary Jackson, if Franklin were there, for I had no doubt that the craven fellow would be only too pleased to back out of an awkward situation and would side with me in persuading the girl to return. No gallant hero this Franklin, I suspected, but the sort of man who would let a girl break her heart rather than endanger his own skin. Hilary alone might be a different proposition, full of fervid and misplaced loyalties, and seeing herself as the passionate woman who dared all for love. A middle-aged headmistress, plain and untouched by romance, stood a small chance of succeeding against such formidable odds, I told myself. The track grew steeper and dustier, and I dismounted. So far I had not met a soul. I stood on the slope of the downs and looked back to the peaceful valley. The still heat was all-enveloping and shimmered on the road so far below. In the fine, dry grass which whispered at my bicycle wheel, a cricket chirruped tirelessly, and away above, a speck against the dark clouds which gathered ominously above the wood, a lark trickled out his clear song like sparkling drops from a fountain. With that awareness which comes from a state of heightened emotion, I could hear each separate liquid note and smell the aromatic tang of the small thyme bruised under my feet. From a tall dock plant nearby hung a dying scarlet leaf, a neat and elegant triangle fluttering like a pennant from a mast. It was as though these small lovely things held out their beauty for the comfort of my sad heart. How easy to succumb, to sit upon this thymy bank and to lose oneself in the company of these old and ever-faithful friends. What business was it of mine to meddle with Hilary Jackson's affairs, whispered a small siren's voice. Sighing, I resumed my uphill pushing, and with a throbbing head and heavy heart approached the cottage in the woods. Hilary Jackson was alone. She had answered my knock at the kitchen door, her face flushed and her eyes bright but wary. She had invited me into the dim interior, cool after the heart of the climb, and we sat now, one each side of the grubby kitchen table, and surveyed each other. "John," she said, throwing the Christian name across at me like a challenge, "John has gone to Caxley and should be back for tea. Perhaps you'll stop?" Her air was studiedly insolent, and she was more nervous than she cared to admit. I decided that a plain approach would be best. "Miss Clare is under the impression that you returned home yesterday. Only by chance I heard that you had been seen in Caxley yesterday evening." "And what have my affairs to do with Miss Clare, or anyone else for that matter?" demanded the girl, tossing her head. "Only this, that the way you behave is noticed by everybody in a small community. By consorting with John Franklin, whose affairs have been watched for many years, I may say, you are giving yourself a bad name. As a teacher, you should be doubly careful of the example you set, and by flouting the conventions, which are, after all, only the commonly accepted modes of decent living, you are not only making a fool of yourself, but jeopardizing your whole career. One silly slip now may mean much future unhappiness." Hilary's face had darkened as my homily unwound. "I don't care a row of pins for what people think of me. Backbiting, narrow-minded, evil-thinking country bumpkins, as stodgy as you are yourself. John Franklin is a fine man, and I'm proud to be seen with him. I suppose a withered old spinster like you thinks that love doesn't matter. Well, it does, and for me everything else must take second place." Her eyes flashed behind her thick spectacles, and she thumped vehemently upon the kitchen table. I answered her quietly. "The world is never well lost for love, in my opinion. And this is not even love, I'm afraid, but a foolish infatuation on your part, which I am positive John Franklin does not share." "You'd never dare say that to his face," she flared. "Indeed I would. And I had hoped that he would be here when I called. I think that you might have seen him in his true colors." There was a pause in the heat of the battle. Through the open door came soft woodland scents that cooled my warm blood. I tried again. "Look, Hilary, please come back to the schoolhouse with me for the night. I'll take you to the station early tomorrow, and you can get home with no one knowing any more of this business. I shall say nothing to Miss Clare or anyone else, and we can scotch any rumors started by people yesterday." The girl rounded on me furiously. "You think I'm ashamed to be seen with him? Well, I'm glad that people saw us together yesterday. I suppose your beastly mind thinks we spent the night here. Well, it's wrong. I stayed at John's sister's in Caxley, and she thinks I've gone home today." Her voice was strident and triumphant, and her eyes glittered with dangerous excitement. She thrust her face close to mine. "And where I spend tonight is my own business. I'm old enough to look after myself." "Old enough," I said sadly, rising to my feet, "but not wise enough. I can see you're in no mood to see reason. Someone will have to make you, but I can't, obviously." I drew the door further back and made my way unhappily into the green and gold glory of the wooded garden. Hilary Jackson stood in the doorway, pink and panting from the tussle, and exalted with her own fine but foolish outpourings. She looked immensely young and silly, and whilst I was very worried, I couldn't help but feel sorry for her. "I'll be in Fairacre if you want me," I called back, lifting my bicycle from the fence. "Don't be too proud to ask for help if you need it. And please do think over what I've said." "Amor omnia vincit," quoted Miss Jackson loudly and soulfully, and, distressed as I was, I noted that my assistant's pronunciation of Latin was execrable. It was hotter and more oppressive than ever as I rode back down the steep slope to Fairacre Road. I must get in touch with her parents at once, I told myself, my head throbbing and eyes half closed against the myriad flies that bombarded my face. I did not know the Jacksons' address, and nothing would make me worry Miss Clare for it, ill as she was. Luckily, by the time I was pedaling along the road toward the spire of St. Patrick's, I remembered the name of Hilary's hometown in the Midlands, and also that her father's Christian name was Oliver. Black clouds were gathering swiftly overhead, and there were ominous rumblings from the Caxley direction as I entered the schoolhouse and made straight for the telephone. "Inquiries, please," I said to the girl, and sank down thankfully, cradling the receiver. The line crackled as the thunder grew nearer. There was a rushing sound outside as the wind which precedes a storm lifted the branches of the elm tree that stands at the corner of the playground. A fierce eddy twirled a few dead leaves and dust round and round in a miniature whirlwind outside the window. The girl was a long time in tracking down the Jacksons' telephone number from the few poor clues that I could supply. As I waited, I was torn with anxiety. Suppose that they had already gone to the house by the sea and that there was no one at home. This was Saturday, and people generally took over a holiday house on that day of the week. And if I did get through, how on earth could I word the dreadful news which I must transmit? Confound the wretched girl, I thought wrathfully, ruining my own and her parents' holidays. A jagged orange streak split the black sky behind St. Patrick's, and a crash like a ton of coals let down upon the schoolhouse roof rocked the room. A faint voice spoke through the hubbub. "You're through," it said. Mr. Jackson listened to my somewhat incoherent remarks with commendable patience. "I'll come straight away," he said decisively. "I can be there in 2 hours, and I'll bring her back with me. Don't worry, and many thanks." I said I was so relieved to find them at home. "My wife had an attack of migraine," he answered, "so we postponed the journey until tomorrow." Another fearful crash shattered the air around me and must have penetrated to the phone. "Are you all right?" said Mr. Jackson. He sounded alarmed. I explained that we were in the midst of a violent thunderstorm. "Oh," he said, "is that all? For a moment I thought you'd fainted. I'll ring off now and be on my way." Through the teeming rain, which now lashed against the window, I saw the church clock. The hands stood at 4:30. On trembling legs, I made my way to the kitchen and filled the kettle. I spent the next few hours making plum jam, with a quarter of my mind on the operation and the other 3/4 imagining the happenings at the gamekeeper's cottage. Would Hilary refuse to go? Would there be any violence? Would the cottage have been struck by lightning and the sorrowing and vengeful father arrive only to find 2 charred bodies among the smoking embers? I did my best to curb these morbid fancies and to concentrate on the jam, but it was uphill work. The storm still raged and muttered, following the line of the downs. At times it died away in intensity, but returned again periodically with renewed vigor. The playground streamed with water, and I guessed that the skylight would be letting through a regular, steady trickle into my classroom. At 9 o'clock, the telephone rang. It was Mr. Jackson's comfortable, deep voice at the other end. "All's well. A few tears on the way, and now the girl's in bed. I thought you might be worrying. We'll write from the other house. Meanwhile, all our thanks." What a day, I thought, as I climbed the stairs to bed 2 hours later. The gutters still gurgled and the thunder still growled in the distance. I looked out upon Fairacre's glistening church and a few streaming roofs among the tossing trees. This was the halcyon village I had mooned over so sentimentally earlier in the holidays, I thought grimly. Where now was the tranquil sunshine, the serenity, the innocent-hearted populace going about its honest business? I thought of the misplaced passion of Hilary Jackson, the cupidity of John Franklin, the evil gossiping of neighbors, the sad injustice of Miss Clare's ill health, the misery of the Coggs family at the mercy of their drunken father under the broken, dripping thatch of Tyler's Row, of the chained, unhappy dogs in back gardens, bedraggled hens cooped all too closely in bare rank runs, and over all the tension engendered by the housing scheme and the ugly passions it aroused. A flash of lightning illuminated the landscape in quivering mauve and yellow lights, distorting its normal lovely coloring to something livid and sinister. Sick at heart, and with the noise of the storm still raging round me, I sought in vain for the comfort of sleep. Part 3. Thunder and Lightning. Chapter 15. Dr. Martin is busy. On the hottest day of the year, Dr. Martin drove on his rounds along the winding lanes of Fairacre. Heat throbbed from the dusty road, the cows were gathered into any patch of shade they could find, and the distant downs shimmered under a burning sky. He had just paid a visit to old Mr. Miller, who had not fully recovered from his paroxysm at the parish meeting. He had aged considerably since this infernal business about the housing estate had blown up, thought Dr. Martin. In a long life, Mr. Miller had had many troubles, but usually he had had his own way. The possession of his farm and his beloved acres, inherited from his family and in trust for the next generation, had given him confidence and joy. With that threatened, he was a lost man, and though he fought bravely and his spirit burnt as fiercely as ever, his aging body paid the price. He no longer slept the deep, dreamless slumber of the healthily tired man who has spent the day working in the open air. His appetite had dwindled, and his sturdy, compact little figure now had a pathetic droop. Dr. Martin knew well that his medicines could do little against this spiritual canker. He doubted very much if they were taken at all, and though he had prescribed sleeping tablets for his crusty patient, he had been told by poor, tearful Mrs. Miller that her husband would not countenance them. It was a wretched threat that hung over them all, and until the thing was settled one way or the other, Dr. Martin supposed that he and his country neighbors would have to continue from day to day feeling as though a weight lay upon their chests. He drew his car into the side of the lane, switched off the engine, and filled his pipe meditatively. Through a wide gap in the hazel hedge beside him, he had a clear view of Hundred-Acre Field and the threatened landscape which now lay with a heart-lifting serenity before him. How long those lovely lines had endured, thought the doctor, blowing out a fragrant blue cloud of tobacco smoke. How many troubled and heavy-hearted men before him, clad in homespun, silks and lace, doublet and hose, aye, and in rough furs, too, had looked as he did now at those immemorial downs, and had there found comfort. "I will lift mine eyes up into the hills whence cometh my help," the psalmist had said, in plain, sober, simple words, as lovely and as refreshing as clear water. And as vital, too, the doctor mused, his mind now running on his patients. In these last few months he had had far more cases suffering from nervous strain than ever before. His advice was generally, get out into the fresh air, look at the life about you, look out and not in. Nature can cure you where I can't. I can only give her a hand. Dr. Martin was a wise man and took his own advice. His observant eye watched now a bee pushing its way busily in and out among the velvety toadflax flowers that flared beneath the hedge in the hot sunlight. Along the edge of the open window crawled a ladybird, so recently alighted that its underwings were untidily folded under their red enameled case and protruded gauzy black snippets. It was moments like these, precious, quiet, contemplative breaks in the doctor's busy day, that revived him and gave him the happiness and power to inspire his patients. Did me good just to see him, people said. Always got time to listen to you. That chap at Caxley, as is always buzzing about like a blue bottle, fair puts you in a tizzy when he comes tearing into the room, and don't appear to listen to half you says. Now our Doc Martin, he can speak sharp if need be, but you know it's for your own good, and he intends to get you well again. He's a real gentleman. The doctor took a last refreshing look at the view through the gap. In the distance he could see the humped thatch of Miss Clare's cottage, his next calling place. He'd better get along, he supposed, switching on the engine, do the job before him, and not linger too much on the misty future. The engine came to life, but before moving off, the doctor rested his hot, sticky hands on the wheel and gazed unseeingly before him. He was drowsier than usual in this heat, and say what you like, this housing estate was deuced unsettling for a man of his age. What would become of him and his wife, and all his great family of patients? He looked forward to retiring very soon, to spending more time with his much-loved wife, to tending his roses, which were among the finest in the county, to pottering about in Fairacre. But the Fairacre he loved and worked in for so many years, not some raw new suburb of Caxley smearing his beloved hills. It might be better to move if this came about. But why on earth should he? Lord, it was little enough to ask after a long life, surely. Just a few years' rest in the same place, with the same friends, the same pastimes and hobbies, and the same, please God, the same downs. The doctor blinked rapidly and let in the clutch. "Let's see if Dolly Clare can give me a cup of tea," he said to the ladybird. "If I go on like this, I shall be in bed with poor old Miller." And we'll follow Dr. Martin to Miss Clare's next time.